Hello and welcome to CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Jason Masker with StrataScale, and we're partnering with CDO Magazine, MIT CDO IQ, and the International Society of Chief Data Officers in a series of interviews. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Julia Bardmesser, SVP and Head of Data, Enterprise Architecture, and CRM Development at Voya Financial. Thank you, Julia, for joining me today.
Hi, Jason.
So, Julia, my first question for you today, with all this talk of data as an asset, what does that really mean? How do you see data, and how does it fit into organizational goals and priorities?
It's an interesting question. So we've been saying data as an asset, like in conferences and everywhere for a while now. Like it's probably, I don't know who coined the phrase, but it's been like 10 years at the very least since I've started hearing it. And sometimes someplace I've heard statement, which is a true statement, that actually data is an only asset because all other assets express themselves through data. Like you don't even own, like you don't really own real estate, you own a paper or a record that says that you own real estate. So that's true, but it doesn't really help either, right? So what does it mean for the organization to treat data as an asset, and how do you deal with it, and how do you evaluate it as well, right? Because if you have an asset, you want to have some way of evaluating what do you have. So the way I think the way usually people think of data as an asset, they think about actually data itself. So content data you have about your customers, data you have about your products, data you have about transactions of your customers. So all of that is in fact an asset, like data in and of itself. However, I think the three dimensions to data as an asset for any company. So that one is the first one, is the content. What do you know about people, products, organizations that you deal with, about your own operations, about your own finances? So that's definitely your asset. But however, if you need to have a capability, it needs to be usable. So that's data capability, which is also part of using data as an asset, because you may have all of this data, but if you have an old mainframe system that doesn't have a relational database underneath, that's nice that you have all of it, you can't use it. So for data to be an asset, you need to have a separate, like adjacent asset, which is to be data capabilities, to bring the data together, to match it together, to make sense of it, to use it in your decision-making processes, and so on and so on. And the third piece, which is probably the most important one, and connected, it's people and culture in the company. Because again, you may have all the data in the world, and you may have nice data warehouses with Tableau reporting. But if you don't have across the organization of culture of putting data first, you don't have subject matter expertise, you don't have people who can understand the data, understand the importance of metadata, meaning descriptions. So as any asset, you want to know, what do you have, where is it, and how can I use it?
Interesting.
So that resides with people, and building that knowledge base. It's really important to have what we call data literacy, data culture. Like there are many names around for that. But I think those are three very important pieces that together allow the company to use data as an asset in multiple ways.
I guess that's a good point. Without the ability to use data, it doesn't have any intrinsic value, right?
Yeah.
So in the context of data as an asset, what is the importance of evaluating data capability when making investments, say for a VC investing in a startup, or even for corporates and their M&A activities? How do you evaluate data?
Yeah. That's all. I've been thinking about this because usually during evaluation, like if it's a VC and the startup, or M&A activity, or PE firm looking to buy and invest into the company, data at most being considered as part of the technology, but not explicitly considered, at least in my experience and in talking to multiple people on this. And the question is, how do you look at it? Like if you look at like the three dimensions that I spoke about before, so you have data in and of itself, data capability, and people. So often when you buy a company, when you buy for market share, you kind of implicitly consider the first one. not explicitly, but implicitly, because that's what you're buying. You're buying customers, right? Or you're buying a set of products. So you're kind of buying data as well. It's not explicit, it's implicit. But data capability piece, that's sometimes considered as part of figuring out what how you can save money, how you can bring things together. So if you bring two companies in, how you determine what your overall saves are going to be, but again, not explicitly of how it accelerates the business. And then I don't think people and talent that you bring is being considered very much at all. So the interesting question is for the startups, especially if they're new, right? So if you have, early stage startups, my view is, and I think it's also somewhat universally accepted, that fintechs or startups of any type that do data well succeed at much higher rate. However, how do you know if it's a new company, hardly has any customers, hardly has built out anything yet, whether or not they're going to do data well? And I think the way I think about it is actually you start with people first. So you talk to CTO and the founders, CEO, CTO, whoever they have, and understand whether or not they actually get the importance of data. Because if they don't get it at the top, highly unlikely there is going to be enough influence to put all the architecture and culture and other people in that would bring that value, unlock the value of data, or use data to accelerate the growth of the company. And you would think, again, one of the interesting things I realized recently, that everybody accepts that you need to look at data. Netflix and Google and all of the companies that we know that grew a great deal based on their knowledge and leverage of data. But I looked at executive MBA's program and some of the very well-known ones. There is no mention of data, none. There are no courses on data management. I didn't do the thorough search, so I didn't do all of them, but I looked at some of the big name ones, and I have some friends who've graduated from them. There is nothing on data management. And I know it's an executive business MBA, and I'm not looking about, it's not that they should learn Python code or, but high level, so you don't have to spend as much time as I spend today explaining what master data management is and why is it important. And then you don't have that question that I'm asking when you evaluate startups. Do the founders who start the new businesses understand and pay appropriate attention to importance of data? And then there is some technical things even in the early products that you can kind of check whether they're doing right. But if you have the first one, the second one, especially when when we see some VAS, they bring people in. So that's everything else you kind of can take from there. But that's a key question to ask.
So you would look at the founders and leadership as indicating the capability and the people they attract around them, the teams that they're going to bring.
And are they going to build the data first culture? Because that's what allows you to make database decisions and evolve your products and accelerate your growth. So that's what I would look at. When you have a larger company, you start looking at data capabilities. And often when I talk about and a lot of us, not just me, when we talk about complexities and working in large, diverse organizations, we say, well, we grew through acquisition and never really integrated, so we have a mess, and now we have to compensate for it. So that's, how often do we hear that? Like, right, very, very often. So here is the thing, right? When we grew, we acquired, and we never integrated. Why didn't we integrate? Because it was really hard. Because we probably bought something without a data capability, without, and I'm gonna, API platform. And so integrating that data into your overall environment and bringing it together was really hard. And we wanted to move on, and we didn't have enough investment to bring that in. So we just did it. And now we have that, disparate data sets, no master data management, all the usual stuff why people like me have a job or series of jobs, because that's the last 3 companies I've been at. That's been one of the major problem statements around data. So looking at data capability, and actually it's paying more for companies that have good data capabilities, which will improve your integration costs significantly once you buy it, and also will allow you to leverage whatever it is you want to derive value from buying that company much quicker. I think that's a very important piece to look at. And if that doesn't happen, like you have to allocate money for data integration. So that's kind of it's a consideration for that. And then one of the bonuses, so some of the companies I've looked at in my life, sometimes there is an incredible team and you want to bring that team in. So sometimes it's on the plus side. They have a data capability, you can reuse them, and now your own footprint becomes so much better. So I think there are multiple ways to look at it, and it's right now not being looked at explicitly. And I think it's in and of itself, it needs to be looked at explicitly during the M&A activity, investment activity, all of that.
Right. So an assessment is incomplete if you don't look at the data capability.
Yeah. And if you hide it under technology, right? If you just say, okay, let's look technically, and the same, I can make a similar set of around cloud. So if the company is cloud native and done well, it's worth more than the company that has a bunch of mainframes in the data center.
Those mainframes are pretty expensive.
Yes, well, that, and again, usability of data, right?
Thank you, Julia, for joining me today. Please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews.
Thank you. It was a lovely conversation.